this is Shubham Tiwari.
And this is Paras.
Welcome to the Sales Panel podcast, where we bring to you the journeys and playbooks of thought leaders from the B2B world. Tune in for all the things on data-driven marketing, product-led growth, and customer intelligence. Our guest today has built and sold 2 six-figure companies and has advised more than 20 organizations on growth and marketing, among many other his accomplishments. He's pretty big on SEO, analytics, demand generation, and growth marketing. He's the head of growth and demand generation at Scribe Media. Cody West, welcome to Sales Panel.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here and do some nerding out on marketing. Always love this.
Cool. So let's begin with the Scribe Media. Please tell us more about it.
Yeah, so Scribe was formerly called Book in a Box. It was founded 7 years ago by Tucker Max, who's a 4-time New York Times bestselling author with a lot of experience in the traditional publishing world, and Zach Obron. And so what they realized is, hey, there's this really old traditional publishing model that takes a lot of money from authors in the form of book royalties. And what if there is a way where we can give 100% ownership to the actual authors? And so that was how the original idea was, sort of created. And now we're at a point 7 years later where we've published over 1,000 books. We've worked with over 2,000 authors, so 1,000 books sort of in the queue. We've worked with people like David Goggins and Tiffany Haddish, the Chipotle CEO, the Nobel Prize Committee. And what's amazing is rather than a book royalty and them making $1 out of the $8, they now get to make the entire $8 on that book sale. And then largely, I'd say most of our customers are experts, entrepreneurs, and executives looking to use the book as a marketing tool, and not really making the ROI back on the book through book sales. So yeah, it was a super interesting model. I heard about it through a friend that I had worked with. Ended up talking to some of the leadership, and the rest is history.
Wonderful, wonderful. I just love David Goggins. He's like this real Superman, right? So
he really is.
Yeah. So speaking about your role, Cody, can you tell us more about your growth efforts for Scribe? What are your biggest accomplishments at Scribe Media?
Yeah, so it's funny. So I used to run a SEO and content marketing agency. It was 5 years. It got acquired last year. But originally Scribe was actually a client of mine. So they were a client for about a year. And then I came on to build their modern data stack. So my background's in data science and analytics engineering. And so I built the modern data stack for Scribe. And that was really kind of like my first, foray into Scribe. And so I just came on as the head of growth in December after doing a couple other things. And so, yeah, initially the big project, I guess, was to understand how revenue is made. There was this big blind spot. And so I built a growth model the first, month. And for those that listening that don't know what a growth model is, it's essentially taking website traffic and then revenue and mapping all the intermediary steps. And so let's say you get 20% of your traffic from organic search. What percentage of that traffic converts into a form submission? And then let's call that a lead. And then what percentage of leads turn into opportunities? And then what percentage of opportunities turn into sales? And what's the length from each one of those stages? And, all that information. So you get a very clear picture of, where there's holes in the business model and marketing efforts and sales efforts and all of that. And so what was really illuminating there was Scribe is insanely efficient in most areas. So like it's a $25 million company with 2 AEs, no SDRs, no outbound efforts. It's all inbound. And so to me, like looking at that, it was like, okay, the real opportunity here now is to create awareness. And so paid social and organic social wasn't something that had ever been prioritized. And so that's where we're focusing a lot of our efforts. And that's because also we've exhausted what we can do from an SEO perspective. That's what they had worked with my company, a number of years ago on. And right now I'd say like 30 to 40% of revenue comes from SEO. But it's you sort of hit a cap with SEO, whereas with paid, you can keep expanding audiences and whatnot. And maybe it gets less efficient over time, but it's more scalable.
Yeah. Interesting. So I was looking at the organic profile of Scribe Media before coming to this conversation, and it looks pretty impressive. So you have already told that the 30 to 40% part is coming from the SEO. So if you look at the overall demand gen playbook for Scribe, so was the SEO most important player from the beginning, or was it growing in parallel with the bad efforts, for example, social media ads and probably LinkedIn ads?
Yeah, so we haven't run any paid. Well, so last year when I wasn't with the company, they had piloted paid social, but it was very much so lead gen focused, not demand gen focused, and so it didn't work very well, because they're trying to get contact information, and take people out of the feed and that sort of thing, and so just not an effective strategy, especially for the high ACV product that we do sell. And so yeah, it was SEO was sorry, my watch is talking to me. So yeah, SEO was not really a major driver in the beginning. So
Mhm.
Tucker Max was the founder, and so the initial brand was really built off the back of his personal brand. And I
Okay.
still think that is one of the most effective strategies to this day for B2B companies, is to build a brand for their founders or their executive team. Like we're doing it right now, not just for our CEO, but CXO, CMO. I'm working on one. Our head of talent acquisition is working on one, and so yeah, that's in my opinion one of the more effective ways. We layered SEO on because at the time there wasn't really a leader in the SERPs for the keywords that people were searching for us, and so it was a very clear opportunity.
All right.
But we had to get really good at sifting through bad leads, because for every one good lead, there would be 9 other bad ones, because you don't get to control the quality of the traffic from search, because it's coming from a search engine. Um, so yeah, like in hindsight, I don't know if I would have done the same thing, investing in SEO
Mm-hmm.
as early as we did. I probably would have got paid to work first. But at that time, it was the, HubSpot inbound model. That was what everyone was talking about.
Right.
And that's sort of what we implemented. But yeah, like if I was looking at it today, I would absolutely be using LinkedIn ads first because of the firmographic targeting. So company size, revenue, industry, job title, seniority. It's just a much more effective way at getting the message that you want to get across to the right people, rather than spreading such a wide blanket.
Wow, interesting. Thanks for sharing this information in detail. I really appreciate it. Coming back to SEO, you have also built a tool called linkintelligence.io, which is a backlink analysis SEO tool. And I think I was listening to one of your interview, and you were talking about using cloud automation in choosing right kind of opportunities in SEO. So can you help us, our audience, understand how automation-based intelligence can help in SEO? I think you were just talking about, figuring out open opportunities in parallel with your other demand gen efforts. So can automation-based intelligence help? And I think you have a lot of expertise there. So a few views will help us.
Yeah, absolutely. So we live in so like I grew up in the analytics world, where SQL Server and these big like inefficient databases were being used for big companies. And then with the
Right.
introduction of cloud data warehouses like Snowflake, Redshift, BigQuery,
Yeah.
it made it so much easier to process data quickly for analysts. And then with ETL tools like Fivetrans and Stitch, and there's a whole slew of other ones, it became really easy to pull data from tools and port them into a data warehouse. And so with SEO specifically, there is a ton of data crunching work if you want to be informed with the decisions that you're making. There's tools like Ahrefs and SEMrush and crawl tools, and you've got Google Analytics and just all these different data sources. And the best analysis usually is blending 1, 2, 3, 4 different data sets together. And by far the best way to do that is using SQL in a database. And so, like what my agency had originally set up was like a very automated, productized SEO process, utilizing a lot of these ETL tools, porting that data into Google BigQuery, having SQL run, and then spit out the output that we needed to do the analysis. And so, I think it saves a ton of time. 2, it allows you to make much more informed decisions about, what keywords to go after and things like that. And then 3, it's repeatable. So once you have a SQL query written, you can update it and run the same analysis. And if you try to do that in Sheets, it's just super messy and not a good time. I guess that sort of leads into link intelligence. So when I was running assisted reach, I kept getting questions from clients about like, how do we measure the ROI on link building? How do we think about when to start building links? What links do we build at what speed? All these questions. And so what I realized is like all this data is available, just no one's really put together the framework for thinking about this. And so when you think about link building, it's one of those things where you only want to invest in it if it's actually going to provide an ROI for your business. And so there's like a framework that I laid out for doing that. And I published an article on Traffic Think Tank, like really detailing what the process was. And then I got a ton of people saying like, oh my God, I love this. This is the first time someone's ever explained to me how to actually think about link building ROI and if I should even build links. And so based on that response, I was like, I could totally build this into a tool and help people, think through this process that, honestly, like if you're not deep into the SEO weeds, link building feels like magic because there's all these weird KPIs and metrics associated with it, trust flow, citation flow, all this stuff. And so, that was sort of how link intelligence was born. But the only way I would have ever known how to build that was with all the cloud tooling that I had, grown up in my career learning. So it was super fun building all that stuff. And that's one of my favorite things about marketing is it's sort of what you make out of it, right? There's like a creative side, there's a really data heavy and analytical side. And I tend to, gravitate more towards the data and analytics side. It's a fun time.
Yeah, I think you kind of have a rare combination where you also have the understanding of these marketing concepts and you also know the data and analytics and probably the building part of it. So it's almost like a superpower that you have.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. So next thing I would like to talk about is you have taken 5 companies from 0 to 100K traffic. That's massive. So I think for beginners out there, what are the most critical aspects of laying a strong SEO foundation? And while we are talking about that, I think we also want to talk about critical mistakes that businesses make while setting up this foundation. If you may want to share something about that.
Absolutely. So I think timing is number one. I see, and part of this is the SEO industry's fault. There's a lot of agencies and consultants and practitioners that the one channel they know in marketing is SEO, and so that's what they push. I used to be one of these people, and the problem is when all you have is a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail. And,
exactly.
And that's very true in the SEO situation where like there's very few businesses where SEO is not going to be a good channel for them, but at the right time. What I see way too often is a company that barely has product market fit or doesn't even have product market fit, and they're already writing blog posts trying to rank for keywords, rather than focusing on product or brand marketing. They're focusing on SEO. And so I think timing is number one. I would, unless you're like, for B2B, almost never SEO is the first channel that you try to get to work for yourself. Almost always paid. The other thing that I always recommend people do before they invest in SEO is to use Google Ads and test to see if those keywords actually convert. Because if you're getting some conversions via Google Ads, you'll probably get more and at a better customer acquisition cost through SEO. But if you don't get any from Google Ads, then it's like there's probably not a ton of opportunity there for you, or it's really top of funnel and you have to have certain retargeting layers in place to be able to monetize that traffic. And so there's just so much that goes into making that successful when you don't have the team and you don't have other channels working for you and you have that pressure. We have to hit revenue targets or whatever it is. It's SEO is usually not the right decision. But if you have the right resources and you have other channels working for you and you have the ability to take the traffic and make the most out of it, you've got solid email marketing, you have a retargeting strategy on paid social, that certain keywords convert via Google Ads, then SEO can be an incredible investment. And so usually the best place to start, there's a new technology that's come out. There's probably like 3 or 4 or 5 companies that have this tool. It's called an automated keyword cluster. And what it allows you to do is take a bunch of keywords. Let's say in your industry, there's 50,000 keywords that are relevant to you, and it clusters them together by page. And so rather than like what most people will do is they'll just export a list of keywords and they'll cherry pick keywords. That looks like a good keyword. That looks like a good keyword. And so they start creating content on that. But what ends up happening is, let's say you get in 50 blog posts, you start getting a lot of cannibalization because you're not targeting all the right keywords to the right page. And so what these clusters allow you to do is really intelligently build pages that target the exact keywords that you need to be targeting, so you avoid those cannibalization issues. And then they also allow you to prioritize pages rather than keywords, because at the end of the day, one page can rank for a lot of different keywords. And so, yeah, I think that's the best place to start nowadays, because then you can look at the entire ecosystem of pages that you would need to build. And then you can estimate, okay, this page could probably generate 1,000 visits a month if we were able to rank in position 4 for it. And based on our Google ad data, we think this will convert at this rate. And then you'll know, okay, on a monthly basis, this page should be able to generate somewhere in this range of revenue. And then you do that for every page. And then it's really easy to figure out what the cost for SEO is. It's content cost. What are your writers? What are your editors? Content manager. And then if you're going to be doing any link building or PR or whatever it is, those costs are usually pretty easy to figure out. And so what I recommend is building like a very rough model of what the expected ROI is for creating that content, and then only do it if it makes sense. There's like a lot of situations that I see where people are doing SEO and it doesn't make sense. It's just like way too competitive, way too expensive, and where they're at it as a business, it's just it's not a good investment for them. They'd be way better spent, like I said, building personal brands, making paid social work, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I think you're talking about a balanced approach where a lot of awareness is going into revenue generation and not doing it just for the sake of doing it. So finding out the market fit and being sure that whatever you're going to rank on is able to generate revenue for your business. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly.
Yeah. I really appreciate the balanced approach that we're talking about here. So there is a follow-up question. Oh, before that, so you were talking about these keyword clusters tools. So is there a place that our audience can more find about it or something more?
Yeah, so there's 2 SaaS products. One's called Keyword Cupid and one's called Keyword Insights. And then my friend Skylar has an agency called Ardent Growth, and he also does keyword clusters. That's where I get the keyword clusters that I use. But it's just like I think I have an article. Yeah, I have an article on my blog where I wrote about, sort of what's happening right now with these keyword clusters. And so listeners can go check that out if they want to. And it'll give you kind of like, based on where you are and what internal resources you have, sort of what direction to go.
Yeah.
Because there's a few different ones to go.
We'll put the link to your blog post, to in the description of this video.
Cool.
Great. So I think there is a follow-up question to what you have already said. But yeah, SEO is a long-term game and is often unpredictable. For example, your competitor might suddenly outrank you. You have already talked about timing, so there is no guarantee of what will rank and what won't. So how do you keep generating organic traffic predictably using SEO? So are we talking about being defensive or being in the attacking mode? For example, do we focus on retaining existing rankings uh, as a more important agenda, or probably aggressively looking for new ranking opportunities by doing more or less the competitive analysis, always greedy for new serve positions? So if you have any opinion on that.
Yeah, it really depends. What I will say is there in the SEO space right now, like really just Google. If you go and Google, how to build links or, something like that, or just like really any term, there's this concept in SEO that came out a while ago called the skyscraper technique, and was basically like, all right, when you're going to create content in SEO, pick read through the top 5 to 10 articles that are ranking and just take all that information and put it all together and just expand even more, And so what you get is like, the best example of this is if you Google a recipe. So if you Google like chicken Alfredo recipe, you click through one of the links and you're just peppered with ads. And then all you want is the recipe, right? You're just like, tell me the ingredients and the steps. And and then what you get is an H2 that says, what is chicken Alfredo? Then it says, what is the benefits of chicken Alfredo? Why is chicken Alfredo important? And it just goes on and on and on. And you're scrolling through ads and you're scrolling through text and you're just like, I really just want the recipe. And so that part of search is absolutely broken. And like, in my opinion, Google needs to do something about that, because we're as marketing professionals and SEO professionals, we're incentivized to create content like that because that's what's ranking. Like, people wouldn't be doing it if that weren't the case. That said, I think there is a big case for trying to be as different as possible while still giving Google what they want. That's usually, like, if you can figure out how to do that, that's where you want to be, because then you're doing right by the users and people who are actually searching for information. And we all know that Google rewards you for on-page metrics, time on page, bounce rate, that sort of thing. And so there are ways to, kind of meet in the middle where you're formatting the content how Google wants and still being different and providing a different perspective. So a good example of this is an article we wrote was targeting the keyword how to write a book. And we wrote a post called "Should You Write a Book?" And so Google was smart enough to realize, oh, this is like a contrarian opinion to this topic. And so when people are searching for how to write a book, they should also consider if they should even write one. And so we were like, that SERP is super competitive from a links perspective. And we had 0 or, less than 10 links to that post, but Google was putting us in position, 6 through 8, because it was providing a different perspective. And so there are a lot of opportunities out there, but you're not going to rank in the top 3 with something like that, because Google is going to take 1 or 2 of those contrarian style posts and rank them. And I think that's a good idea. The other thing that you can do is use different content formats within the post. So embedding podcasts, embedding video, things like that. Just giving people the option to consume content in a different way. So yeah, there are things that you can do like that. There's also like more product-led SEO where you're building something that's useful, that feels more like a product that's also ranking for keywords. So yeah, there's a lot to think about there, but yeah, I would say be different. Don't just copy people. And then this is the biggest one. Make sure that there's a subject matter expert that is heavily involved in the content creation process. There's so many keywords that I'll search for in the marketing space. This is why I can't use Google to find marketing content anymore. The only place to find good marketing content is on LinkedIn. You can't use Google to find good marketing content anymore because, like I said, it's all rehashed stuff, really old websites, and it's usually outsourced content. And so it's not written by someone who's deep in the weeds and really knows what they're talking about. And so, yeah, like when we're creating, like we're pursuing a new avenue in audiobooks right now at Scribe. And we're creating blog content for that because there's a lot of good traffic for us to obtain there. We have our head of audiobook production reviewing outlines and putting his thoughts in and saying, you should phrase this way. You should talk about it this way. Here's what people care about when it comes to this. Like someone who really knows what they're talking about. And then he's involved post outline and then post writing. And so there's a lot of checks for him to be like, yeah, this is something that I would say and I would write. And so, yeah, I would really encourage people to not do SEO unless they have a subject matter expert helping them with the content creation process.
Great. That there are some golden pieces of wisdom here. Thanks for answering that. Over to Shubham now.
Yes. So, Cody, speaking, more of Google, they are dropping Universal Analytics and focusing solely on Google Analytics 4. So, and since you're pretty big on analytics engineering, so what do you make of this change?
Yeah, see, I honestly very rarely use Google Analytics. It'd be different if I was, marketing for like an app that has users and things like that, where there's a lot of user metrics that you can use GA for. The only thing that I'm really using GA for nowadays is for content consumption metrics. So like with paid social, for example, like I want to know if people are clicking through on the ad, like are they actually consuming the content? So I'm looking at like average time on page and bounce rate and pages per session and things like that. But yeah, like in my opinion, the best and most rich marketing data is coming from your CRM. And so we spend way more time analyzing the data in our Salesforce instance than we do with Google Analytics. So yeah, I've poked around GA4 and I think what they have with attribution now is pretty interesting. I have a lot of thoughts on attribution and I think it's like a very misunderstood aspect within marketing. But yeah, I'm definitely not a wealth of knowledge on GA just because I honestly don't see a massive need for it for the type of B2B marketing that I'm doing.
Right. So, Cody, speaking about your podcast and your other, pursuits, like you're working on a book, if I'm not wrong. So please tell us more about both of these.
Sure. So podcasts are one of the best content formats for creating personal brands, and because you can chop up the podcast into clips and you can use those clips to then distribute. And so what we're working on right now at Scribe is essentially how can we create content for like 6 executives, 7 videos every week. So there's a post on LinkedIn every day with a video and content. And podcast is the most obvious avenue for that. And so I also see podcasts aren't going to get smaller. They're only going to keep getting bigger. And I think there's something to longer form content in terms of building trust and credibility with an audience. And so I'm a huge fan of them. And so right now I'm trying to get as many reps as I can hosting podcasts. So I'm very interested in crypto and Web3, very bullish on certain projects. And so one of my friends who works in the Web3 and crypto space, we've been doing a podcast. We have 2 episodes under our belt. We just started in the Web3 space. And so that's been super fun. We've talked to a couple of really interesting people. And so, yeah, I think podcasting is is one of those skills that as a marketer, if you have, it's going to be more valuable as time goes on. And so I'm really focusing on building that skill. So we're doing a Scribe marketing podcast. I'm doing a crypto podcast right now. I'm going on podcasts. And then at the end of Q3, we're going to be launching more of like a book related podcast at Scribe that I'll most likely be hosting. And so, yeah, just essentially just trying to get reps there. And then what was the second part of the question?
About your book.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So at Scribe, we get the benefit. So if you've been with the company for, I believe it's 18 months, then you get the Scribe publishing package or guided author package for free. And so if you write the book, then they'll do all the editing and, cover design, back cover, author bio, layout, all that stuff, and publish the book for you. And so, yeah, I am working on a book. I'm posting very consistently on LinkedIn and testing a lot of ideas and thoughts and just seeing kind of what resonates with people. But it'll most likely be a book about how to measure marketing the right way. There's so much information out there on measuring marketing, but I feel very few people have really figured it out. And it's so context specific and it's so nuanced and it's so different from channel to channel. And so I want to work on a book that sort of simplifies that and gives people the principles and the framework to think about measuring marketing. Because yeah, like from someone like me that came from a very data heavy background, like you wouldn't expect me to say there's a lot of things in marketing that you can't measure and that's okay. Or there's data that you can use that isn't quantitative where you can't build charts or graphs out of it, but still incredibly useful. And so, sort of talking through the nuances of that and yeah, I think I'm positioned well to speak to that because I can write Python and SQL and I do have a data heavy background, but I'm also going to be saying things like, just do it. Don't wait for perfect numbers, things like that.
Right. And just, one message for the benefit of our audience that Cody is one of the best people to follow on LinkedIn. You'll get so much, knowledge per post. We can attribute it that way. So Cody, speaking about books of others, because this is a ritual we follow on the show. What books you rate as, your top 2 books or top 3 books?
Yeah. So my favorite book of all time is Ready Player One. It's a fiction book.
Yeah.
Ernest Cline. Yeah.
You've seen the film. Yeah.
I have. Yeah.
Yeah.
I read the book first. And so the film for me was a little bit of a letdown, but I still love it. It's still one of my favorite movies just because I absolutely love the concept of the metaverse. And but yeah, I absolutely love that book. In terms of, it's so funny because it's like my favorite book is the last book I read, because I'm usually very passionate and fired up about whatever it is that I'm reading. So if anyone's interested in crypto, there's a book, there's a very good introductory book called Crypto Assets. It's written by a guy from the finance world. And so it's written it's written in plain English. It's not like developer level. So there's not too much jargon. And if there is jargon, it's defined well. So yeah, I've really enjoyed that book. In terms of books that have been like really impactful for business, I'm trying to think right now. I think I recommend this book a lot. So I actually recommended this to someone who was asking for career advice on LinkedIn the other day. It's called So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport.
Yeah.
And it's excellent for like people earlier in their career that are trying to get to a point where they essentially are happy, and he talks about there are 3 elements to, career happiness that's been found. And one is autonomy. So you feel like you have control over your time, and how you do your work and things like that. 2 is value, like you value the skill set that you're building. So for me, I love marketing. And so every day that I get to do marketing, I feel like I'm, sharpening that sword. And so there's a lot of value in that for me. And then 3 is you're working on something that is bigger than yourself. There's some greater mission. There's, you're doing good for the world or for people, and you feel really good about what you're building for reasons beyond your own personal wants. And so if you can hit all 3 of those things, then that's apparently what career success is. So yeah, I think that advice is extremely wise. And so I highly recommend especially people newer in their career, or maybe people that are uncertain or looking to make a career change, that sort of thing. It really provides a good mental framework for approaching work life.
Superb. You're the first person who has recommended a fiction book on our show, and that too a wonderful one. So thank you for that. And
Of course.
Cody, would you like to nominate anyone for our show?
You guys should talk to our CMO, Chris Piper. Him and I are really good friends. He's a great marketer. I think he's like, I think the type of content that I create on LinkedIn and I like talking about is like very strategic and even tactical. He is a great person to talk to about like business strategy and running a team and company culture and things like that. And so, yeah, I would recommend him. Yeah.
We'd love to host him. And thank you so much, Cody. You've been very generous with your time. And is there anything that you wanted to talk about and we missed out on? Now is the time to do that.
Nope, that's it. Thanks so much for having me on. This was super fun. I love chatting about marketing. And so, yeah, I really appreciate it.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure for us.
Yeah. And thanks to our audience as well, because they stuck with us. So see you in the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.